Chapter 17, independent pronouns, and we start the verb, we'll do the perfect, call perfect. Starting in chapter 17, we really do start, we emphasize now the verb. The chapters before we were looking at prepositions, nouns, and adjectives. Now we start looking at verbal forms, and so that's going to be our emphasis. Chapters 17 through 19 are very important, and we're going to have different forms of the verb that you're going to have to memorize. But if you memorize these forms, it's going to help us when we really expand the verb, when we get around chapters 22 through 25. It'll be much easier. But these you simply have to memorize. You want to write them out a lot, and you want to recite them orally. So with that in mind, the first thing we want to do is look at the independent pronouns, and that is section 2. And again, you need to commit these pronouns to memory. They occur very frequently in the Hebrew Bible. And these pronouns are essentially subject markers. They do not occur as direct objects, but they always occur as subjects. And so you want to keep that in mind. Moreover, when you see pronouns, often, not always, but oftentimes they are emphatic. And so in the example I give you like ata amarta, you. It is you who has said. You know, it's more emphatic by putting the ata there usually. Then in 17.3 you have your first verb forms, and that is the call perfect. This is also called the katal form, and this form here is based on the perfect 3ms. And you can see these are just the same forms, a transliteration of it, katal. And so this is known as the katal formation. And again, you're going to need to memorize this. Notice this is like a past tense, I killed, or like an English perfect, I have killed. And so keep that in mind. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out, and that is this vowel right here is very important. The second vowel under the R2 letter, the second root letter. It's very important because that's where a lot of action occurs in the verb. This vowel we will call the thematic vowel. And that thematic vowel is going to change a bit in Hebrew. Sometimes it's going to be reduced to a shva, and if you put the form in pause, if we put a pausal form like an athnach here, it would actually lengthen to a kametz. So the thematic vowel, there's a lot of action that goes on there, and so I want you to know that the vowel under the second root letter, we're going to call a thematic vowel, and much of our discussion will be based on that. In the next little section I have there, in section 2 under 17.3, what I'm doing is showing you how the pronouns, the independent pronouns that you learn in section 2, are connected to the endings of the perfect as you see in 17.3. So let me just give you one example. This is the second masculine singular. What I have written down in your textbook is something like, let me see, is this, of course. And what it is you can see the ata of the independent pronoun. But basically they sort of cut it down, and this is the main indicator here of that second person singular. And that's what they stick onto the verb, and you get katalti. So that the form ultimately, or excuse me, katalta. I didn't say that right. So katalta, and that ta there is part of the ata that you see as your second masculine singular independent pronoun. So I just want to show you how these go together, and that's why I'm putting these together. Next, we do want to talk about the endings that you put on these verbs. We're going to divide the endings into two classes. We're going to call one ending syllabic ending, and by a syllabic ending, we mean that the ending is a syllable. Like for instance, tav, the second masculine singular, that's really a syllable. You have a consonant and you have a vowel, and that makes up a syllable. That's a syllabic ending. And I will break the syllabic endings into two groups. The so-called heavy endings. We're going to talk about the tem and the ten, which again is very similar to the heavy endings that you get in the pronominal suffixes, the chem and the chen. And so those are the heavy ones. But also there's one ending that I do need to point out. And this ending is your 2fs, this T here with a silent schwa. We will consider this a syllabic ending, though it's not a syllable. This is a tav with a silent schwa. Originally there was a vowel there, and originally it was a syllable, but for our purposes we will consider this a syllabic ending. And then finally we're going to have another type of ending called vocalic ending. By vocalic we mean simply a vowel attached on, and that's what you're going to see in two forms. You're going to see it in the third feminine singular form. Remember, this is simply a phony hey, and there's the vowel attached to the end of the word. And as you probably would surmise now, originally, again, you had a tav here, maybe with the patach, but again, they didn't pronounce that, so they lengthened this by compensation, and that's the vocalic ending. And this hey is, again, just phony, thrown on there to get you to read long comments in a unpointed text. And yet there's one more, and that's the third common plural, common for both masculine and feminine. And again, you can see the ending here is simply a shuric, just tacked right on. So those are your two vocalic endings. So it's important to keep those in mind. Now, let's describe some of these endings as we attach them. Let's look at the 1CS form. The 1CS, this is the form. The 1CS has a syllabic ending, this T here, and your thematic vowel here is under the second root letter. It takes the accent. And now we have a kametz here under the kof. Well, in Proto-Hebrew, obviously the kametz goes back to a patach, and in the open pretonic position, that's why we're lengthening this. Okay, now you have an accented closed. Remember the nouns, what we would say is, well, you would expect a long vowel, but the verb won't do it. The verb sometimes follows a different reduction pattern than what you see with the 5 rules that we did back in chapter 6. The reason why, one of the reasons probably why they did not lengthen this is that allows for the pausal option. In pause, you would have closed accented in a pause situation. This is saluk here. Now you would have that option. But again, the thematic vowel's where the action is, and so it's usually left like this, as I have it here. Now, as I mentioned, one of the syllabic endings, well, two of them, are called heavy. And these heavy suffixes are heavy because they take the accent. The accent shifts on down, and so really here's your protoform. This syllable here in the middle is closed and accented. Just keep it short like it is. But now this patach is in trouble. It's now in the originally open propretonic, and you can see the rules work perfect on this one. Katal 10, you see. This being a 2FP. 2FP. Now the vocalic forms. Now these you have to watch out for. The vocalic forms also shift the accent down, but this time we get reduction under the thematic vowel. When you have a vocalic ending, you're going to have reduction in the verbs. We've got to remember this. This is a very important distinction from the nouns. Vocalic endings will give you reduction of the thematic vowel in the call perfect in particular. And now what's interesting is we get this as a long kametz, and so this has got to be seen as pretonic open, and that's why you're getting lengthening here. But this is clearly reduced. And again, this is part of the action that you get with thematic vowel. The thematic vowel is where the action is in Hebrew verbal system. And the same with your 3CP. You have the vocalic ending, so you get reduction for your thematic vowel. But again, this lengthening has to be perceived as pretonic open, and that's why you're getting that long comments there. And so, again, when you have a vocalic ending, you're going to reduce your thematic vowel. That's very important to remember. Now we need to talk about one other that we call a non-ending. I guess we do have yet another category, a non-ending. And that would be your 3MS. All other forms of the call perfect, you have some kind of ending, either a syllabic ending like this, or a vocalic ending like that, which of course you'd get reduction when that happens. But there is one form, namely your 3MS, where you have no ending whatsoever. And again, your accent here, pretonic open lengthening there. And here there's no ending whatsoever. And so again, as we've said before, this implies a third person. So katal means to kill, so he killed is the idea here. Now we'll talk about the meaning of the perfect, the call perfect. Hebrew varies meanings of the verbal actions with different stems. And you'll learn about those when we get to chapters 22 through 25. Things like the PL, PUAL, HITHPAEL, HIFIL, HOFAL, and then the NIFAL. We'll learn those later. The call, the word call means light. It's the light stem because there's nothing added to the front of it, nothing added, no type of addition in the middle of the word, some type of doubling. But it's just it's called light because it doesn't have any of the heaviness of something doubled in the middle or something added on the front, something like that. But the call gives basically a basic meaning. When you get to the other ones, they can sometimes add certain nuances. So a PL is more of an intensive stem. A HIFIL is more of a causative. And there it's you call someone to do something. Or in the intensive, it might be kill, but then it might be kill one right after another, slaughter. And so these other stems bring certain nuances, added nuances. But with the call, it's usually just the plain meaning without any idea of intensification or causation, something like this. And so for right now, again, you just want to translate a perfect as a simple past tense or a perfect tense. And as you get more experienced in Hebrew, you'll find out other ways that you can translate a perfect. And even in a few more chapters, we will vary. We'll give you more options in translating the perfect. But for now, that'll be enough. So that's the meaning of the call perfect. And that's really your introduction to the verb. Make sure you memorize the call perfect paradigm and those independent pronouns. And then you should be ready for your questions and then to do the drills.